Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Davison Humphries, and this is This Week in Civics with the Bill of Rights Institute, where we talk about what's happening in civics, a little bit of history, a little bit of everything, with me, your host, Rachel Davison Humphries. I'm the Director of Outreach at BRI, and I'm so excited to be here with you this second week of March. So this week, it's Women's History Month, and I wanted to take a moment. BRI has a lot of different kinds of events going on, and I wanted to share some of the things we're doing to celebrate this. So when we think about Women's History Month, the thing that I think about most is women's voices, and how do we magnify those voices all the time, but especially during this month? How do we tell the stories of women in American history to uplift and honor their contribution? Because often when we tell these huge sweeping stories, the details of the individual lives get lost, and we end up focusing on the big actors in the big events when there are so many supporting actors and supporting agency and supporting events that lead up to those big events, but we just don't have time and frankly don't have the capacity to see all the moving parts and all the different aspects of periods throughout history. So we look at these big sweeping arcs, and what gets lost there are the personalized experiences. And so something that I really enjoyed doing when I was in the classroom, and things I still enjoy reading about, are these, unique individual experiences. And the way that you can introduce that flavor, that spice to any narrative, is by looking for the stories of the women, and especially the stories of diverse or divergent women. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So over at the Bill of Rights Institute website, if you go into our new website and our new search bar, you'll find that we have over 130 different resources on women. That includes our massive curricular resource called Votes for Women, which also has 2 YouTube homework help videos looking at the history of women's suffrage. Votes for Women is a resource that looks at the entire span of the women's suffrage movement and says, how does constitutional social change happen? Looking at like the 100-year history of just getting the right to vote, which doesn't even disrupt any of the other restrictions on women's lives, like financial or when it came to their children. So it was just looking at the restrictions on their suffrage, on their ability to vote. And then we also have other stories to tell on our website. We have a podcast on the 2 Marys, which I absolutely love, looking at Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley. There's a great biography of them as well. But our podcast, Fabric and History, has a great episode on the 2 Marys. Mary, my colleague, did a fantastic Bridge from the Past on Dorothea Lange. We have resources all the way up to Betty Friedan. So when you're looking to tell interesting, diverse stories, I recommend you just type in that search bar for whatever your search term is, and it'll take you there. So thinking again about how to tell more stories and stories that are unique and interesting and that aren't always part of the narrative, I think there are 2 ways to think about it. You can have divergent voices and then voices from diverse backgrounds, right? And so both of those are a kind of diversity that you want to introduce yourself to and your students to and your children to, because that's kind of showcases our complexity as Americans, and it showcases the complexity of experience. One of my favorite divergent voices are the Grimké sisters in the abolitionist and suffragist movement. We have a resource on Sarah Grimké's. It's annotated, so helping you read it along. It's a letter on the equality of the sexes that she wrote in 1837, trying to inspire women to join the suffrage movement after she exited the abolitionist movement because the enslaved people were freed. Sarah Grimké is a fascinating character because she was actually a Southern woman who became an abolitionist and then a suffragette. And so she's this great character of divergent voice, of someone in their community speaking truth to an oppressive majority, right? Then when we want to think about diverse voices, BRI also has a number of resources. One of my favorite stories of diverse voices is Belinda Sutton. She's not particularly well known. Her writing was only, or her petition was only rediscovered in about 2015. She'd been known to scholars, but Belinda Sutton was actually an enslaved woman in the 1780s in Massachusetts. And what's fascinating about Belinda Sutton is based on the arguments of freedom of the Revolution of the United States. she petitioned the state of Massachusetts for a portion of her slaveholders' estate, and she won. And so you can go and read her essay and think about those arguments, think about the nature of freedom and what our responsibility is in a free society. The other thing that we're doing, which is really exciting, is on Thursday, we're publishing a close read on another great text that I really enjoy reading when it comes to, again, the personalized experience and what is the human impact. And this is the Cherokee Women Address Their Nation in 1817, which is a fascinating document of the Cherokee women addressing a gathering of the chieftains. And so it thinks about roles and responsibilities within that community, but also they're petitioning that the men behave differently when it comes to how they're negotiating the land grants to the U.S. government. And so they're involved in politics and agency, and they're addressing their nation in this really beautiful way. But I want to hear from you too. What are your favorites? So the two I mentioned were from early American history, because I think that often those are the ones that are even harder to find just because documentation was so hard. But what are your favorite divergent voices or diverse voices? Who do you look to when you're looking for that additional experience of a moment in history? What are your favorite stories? I'd love to hear from you. Write in the comments. All the things I just listed are in the comments for you to track down. So comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you want to hear. I'm here every week. A bunch of the resources I described are also in this great book that I really love called Available Means, an Anthology of Women's Rhetoric by Joy Ritchie and Kate Ronald. It's a fantastic collection of women's voices speaking agency in whatever community they are, starting all the way in the 1300s, going up to modern day. So thinking about diverse voices and your diverse voice in our community, we would love to hear from you. So reach out to me. My name is Rachel Davison Humphries.